Welcome back to the Investor Professor Podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 76. On this week's episode, I just have a lot of little topics. I don't even know what to call this episode. We'll have to figure that out. We'll do a market update, talk about the Fed, talk about Joe Rogan, Spotify, and we will just see where it goes. So, hope you'll join me on the other side, get your mind right, and let's get to work. All right. Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. Appreciate you joining me. I know this is a busy month, busy time of year. I'm busy, you're busy, so I appreciate you taking time to listen to this. I mentioned some of the different topics I wanted to discuss this week, and one of them is that Spotify's Wrapped came out this week, talking about just like the different, how things are going, details about you. Many of you've seen it. If you listen to Spotify, it shows you like your number one song that you listen to, all those kinds of things. Well, when you host a podcast, they do that as well, and they kind of send you information about how you're doing with listeners. And so it's pretty neat to see. Those of you who follow us on Instagram, we'll be posting it up there. But just some of the highlights. We're in the top 25 most shared podcasts globally, listened to in 15 different countries. In the top 20% of most followed podcasts around the world, which is pretty incredible. We've added 81% of our listeners have been added in 2022. And so, just to give you a little bit of appreciation, I appreciate it. I know that finance isn't the most interesting thing that people want to talk about. I thought about starting this show talking about the Fed and Jerome Powell, and I go, nah, man, I can't really start the show with that. People are you can just like start hearing people snoozing as we go along. So it's more difficult than you think to make finance interesting every single week, but I do appreciate you sticking with us and sharing this podcast and helping people to kind of get some clarity on their financial journey and just kind of their life journey on making things a little bit easier for them. So pretty interesting to see those numbers and how well we're doing. We add listeners every single week. I used to track it on a weekly basis. I don't anymore. And so we're looking at adding some things. One of the main things that kind of requests we get is to record these podcasts and put them up on YouTube, like a video version. Not really sure why people are so interested in that, but we are working on that. So 2023 should bring some improvements across the board as far as that's concerned, more interviews, things of that nature. So anyways, I appreciate it as always. It doesn't go unnoticed. And so, you look at, now I'll get to the boring stuff. So you look at this past week, the market did pretty well on Wednesday. Jerome Powell spoke and he discussed interest rates and said that we might be getting to a point where they don't have to do as high of rate hikes. So instead of doing 75 basis points, they might be able to do 50 basis points and then maybe 25 and then hold interest rates steady early next year. That would be a big deal for the market because if interest rates are held steady, then, consumers and investors and, others are able to make plans. It's hard to make plans when interest rates are going up every single month or every other month. And so what ends up happening is businesses and consumers say, I think I'm going to hold off on this. Insert big item here, new plant, new house, whatever it is. I think I'm going to hold off until I kind of get some clarity on where interest rates are going. And so if we get that, that will provide a little bit of stability that we see in the, that we should see in the market. And so it looks like, I take all this with the grain of salt. It's called, this is the macro environment, right? If you think back to macroeconomics. And when I'm researching companies and looking at new investments, I really don't take this with too much seriousness because it's something that impacts all companies. So if you have a company that's kind of the strongest in its sector, it's still going to be the strongest, even if these things, play out, and there's nothing that the companies can really do to impact it, right? They can't really change it. So, I do factor it in, but it's not the most important thing that I'm looking for. And so, you go back last week, we talked about the top 5 investment habits that you can do. And one of those was patience. And I wanted to draw your attention. I didn't mention this last week, and I read about it this previous week, but one of the people I always follow and I always listen to is a guy named Howard Marks. He started Oak Tree Capital Management. He's not, he's, to me, hero to me, but not many people know about him. But you can go read all these memos that he's done over the numerous years, and he does a great job writing. But he was pointing out that there was a study done about Fidelity, the big Fidelity company. And this, again, when I'm telling you this, think about me talking about patience in the last episode and not trading too often, which I've told you numerous times. But the name of this article is Fidelity's Best Investors Are Dead. And this was published in the Conservative Income Investor on April 8th, 2020, if you want to go look it up. But it said that Fidelity looked at all their accounts between 2003 and 2013, so a 10-year period, and they wanted to see who performed the best, right? So we're gonna look at all of our accounts, we're gonna see who performed the best, and then we're gonna see what did those people have in common. Well, based on the title of the article, Fidelity's Best Investors Are Dead, you can kind of see where this is going. And so when they did an audit of all their accounts to figure out who the best investors were, they were either dead or inactive. They were dead or inactive. So basically they were, because Fidelity has so many retirement accounts, they were either people who passed away and it was an estate account and the family hadn't claimed the money yet, or they were people who had switched jobs and they just left their old 401k at their employers. So they literally had no activity, and those were the best performers. And think about it, that was during 2008, 2009 financial crisis, right? Where so many people sold out, didn't buy back in. I mean, just, we shoot ourselves in the foot, we zig, the market zags, and all of a sudden we have cost ourselves performance. And so it just goes to show, and I'm kind of haunted by this, obviously, because what I do, I'm making sure that I try not to have too much activity in my clients' accounts. But Warren Buffett once said that he would be worth more money today if he had never sold out of anything. He'd be worth more money today if he just had done nothing. And some of those investments that he invested in early on, there's a lot of investments that would have gone to zero. Like he would have had investments that went to zero, but he would have, the ones that he stayed in would have far outperformed the others. And so these are the things you have to think about. Even Peter Lynch, who ran the Magellan Fund for Fidelity back in, I think the 80s and 90s, he was one of the best fund managers they ever had. He talks about one of the worst investments he ever made was Home Depot. And so he went to the original, I believe it's the original 4 Home Depots, and he invested in them. And then the stock went up 25%, 25 times, and he sold out. And then after he sold out, Home Depot went up another 200 times. And he says, everybody looks at that investment as a great win for me because I made 25 times my money. And he's like, but that could have been the biggest winner of my life if I would have held on to it. And so, it just goes to show, if you have a good investment idea, a company that you really believe in, you got to stick with it. And sometimes in so many areas of our life, the more activity we have, the better we do. And in investing, that's just not the case. And so you also have to think about these companies that you trade through: Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Schwab, Robinhood, whoever it is. They're no longer charging commissions, and so the way they make money is by you trading more often. And so their commercials, all that, and I've said this over and over again, so I'll get off this soapbox. But their commercials are trying to entice you to trade because that's how they make money. And so you have to go against the grain on that. If you really want to outperform the market and kind of outsmart yourself a little bit. So Anyways, in the next 2 weeks, the Fed's going to meet again here on the 13th and 14th, which is not this week, but the following week. The CPI number comes out, I believe, on the 13th. So this week in the market should be pretty dead. But again, I still think over the next 12 to 18 months, I mean, this is a good time for you to accumulate shares, really start to build your portfolio and kind of build the foundation for that. So if you haven't started investing, I mean, you got to get with it. You got to think about yourself later on. And it's just something that you have to figure out how to do that. So one of the other things you can do if you have a 401k account is think about increasing your percentage next year. That could be something you could do to kind of save more money next year than you did this past year. And even if you just increase your 401k contribution by 1%, it's hard to say, it depends on your income and things like that. But just say a 35-year-old earning $60,000 a year, if they increase their 401k contribution by 1%, that means they'd have about an extra $85,000 in their retirement account at 67. And that's just if they make 5.5%. So depending on how much money you make, what your age is, increasing it by 1% can make a substantial impact on what you're going to have in retirement later on. And you probably won't even notice when they start taking that money out of your account. So another thing I wanted to discuss is that, a week or two ago, I posted I sent a video that Joe Rogan did from one of his interviews. Sent it to my marketing team. Shout out, Reaching Dreams. And I said, man, let's animate this video. I think there's a lot of people that feel this way. And so fast forward to today. If you follow us on Instagram, you've probably seen this video. It's Joe Rogan talking about one of his favorite quotes, which is, most men live lives of quiet desperation. And so this thing, at the time of my recording this, has gotten over 355,000 views. And the comment section's blowing up. People are angry, saying it's not just men, it's women. People take things out of context. I think the real lesson in this video is that it talks about how, if you don't take control of your life, that all of a sudden you buy things, you lease a car, you have a family, you have all these obligations. And so you feel stuck in your job or whatever, and that you're just it's just Groundhog Day every single day. And so, my point of posting that video is that I see it with people I know. I see it with older people, younger people, whatever it is that, I know I've taught a lot of college kids. And one of the things that I'm always kind of want them to be aware of is that all of a sudden, you're growing up, people tell you to get good grades so you can get into college, and get good grades in college so you can get a good job. And then all of a sudden you get this job that you were supposed to really enjoy, and you're miserable, and you have, a house to pay for, student loans to pay for, and you expected all this stuff to work out, and it just didn't. And so, you have to figure out what success is to you and how do you create that, because it's something different for every single person. And really, when you think about just your life in general, it's really about the journey and enjoying the journey. You have to enjoy what you're doing. You have to, because it can start to feel like you wake up every single day, and it's the same thing, and it's the same conversations, and how did this happen? And so, I think that video going viral shows how many people feel that way. And so, we talk here about your financial journey, your life journey, and making sure that you are conscientious of the choices that you're making and how that's going to impact you. Now, there's people in the comment section that are mad that he's talking about, from a male standpoint, and the women are saying, hey, we feel that way too. I know. I mean, like, being a mom is hard. Being a wife is hard. There's tons of pressure on everybody. And, unfortunately, I think most people suffer in silence, which isn't a good thing. It's they feel like they can't talk to anybody about it, and they don't realize that a lot of people that they know that they interact with on a daily basis feel that way. And so no one big change is going to make it happen unless, you can quit your job, you can switch, but normally, the problems that you're going to have at a new job, the problems are going to, sometimes you just want new problems, I guess. You're always going to have, there's always going to be issues, but you have to think about, okay, what are some small changes I can make that are going to make a big difference in the future? And so again, I've said this recent weeks too, but we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 5 to 10 years. And so here we are, December. I'm looking at my goals for next year, and one of my main goals is the same as it was this year. So my main goal is to grow my investment practice to $100 million under management. And so with the market being down this year and just different circumstances, I'm not going to hit that goal this year unless, I guess I could, but most likely it's not going to happen, and that's okay, but it's still my number one goal. I don't feel like a failure because I didn't hit it, but I'm still going to be working towards that goal, which, by the way, I need to I've been talking to some of the people that we interviewed last year on what their goals were for this year, and I'm not sure they want to come back on and talk about where they're at. Again, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but I hope that they'll keep working on those, and we'll see if we can't pull that together. But it is something you have to be proactive with, and it makes a big difference. So you have to create your life. But I just thought, it's worth touching base on this. I know some of you listening to this haven't seen the reel. You're probably not following us on Instagram. If you can go look at it if you want, but it is something that a lot of people feel like is that at some point their life feels like Groundhog Day. And so how do you prevent that? Not prevent it, but how can you work around feeling that way all the time? And what are some things that you can do? And really enjoying what you do, enjoying the people that you work with makes a big difference. I've been traveling a lot to see clients. Will be this next week as well. But one of my favorite things about going and visiting clients is the reason that I love having my own practice and not working for a mutual fund or someplace where I don't know the people that I'm managing money for, is because I really get a lot of enjoyment seeing the families that I'm managing money for. Seeing them, their kids, their grandkids, just seeing the impact that I'm having on people is a big deal for me. It kind of revitalizes me. It makes me realize, okay, the things that I'm doing really do matter. And for me, there's a lot of excitement in that. And so I enjoy getting to go see people. It's one of the things about doing a podcast like this is, and I think why a lot of people, when you look at podcast stats, how many people stop doing them is because, my friends have heard me say this, but, sometimes you're just talking at a wall. And so you have to think about, okay, who am I actually talking to? Because it does become difficult because you can't see, the faces or, the reaction of the people that you're talking to. Now, of course, I'm well trained because I've been teaching 18, 19-year-olds for years, getting blank stares. So, this is no problem. So, of course, I say that tongue in cheek, but, you gotta, you have to be conscious of these things. So to leave you with one more thing today, when you look at 2023 and your goals for 2023, first look at what success looks like to you. Not what society says is success, but what success looks like to you, and try to align your goals with where you're trying to get to for your level of success, for what you want to have happen in your life, for you to consider yourself successful. And if you do that, I think it'll lead you to, a place of more happiness, more abundance, more appreciation. But I think sometimes we kind of get wrapped up with where people think we should be rather than where we really, truly, deep down where we want to be. And so maybe that's what leads us to unhappiness, because we're doing something that we think other people said we should do. And then when we get there, we're not happy, right? So you have to kind of think about where you want to be and let that be your guiding light versus where everybody else tells you you should be. So I hope this is helpful. I know this is a random, kind of just off the wall, kind of random episode, but I hope it helps you. We got more interviews coming in the future. And so I appreciate you as always. Hope you have a great week. Don't mistake activity for achievement, and I'll see you next time.